Good afternoon, everyone. Rich Wildman here. Glad that you've joined us today on Music Scene Investigation, where we'll take three random selections from our submitted songs, submitted by artists all around the world, and we'll put them in front of our panel once again. On today's panel, our in-house panelists who are with us every week, Mr. Tom Chianti from New York City. Hello, Tom. How are you once again?
Hi, Rich. I am doing fine. It's a sunny day, and I am looking forward to a very interesting show.
I'm sure it will be interesting. Glad you're with us. I trust the weather's treating you all right in New York.
Little arthritis kicking up now and then, but nothing, that can't be handled with an aspirin.
Well, that's good to hear. An aspirin does wonders these days. I appreciate you being with us, Tom. Mr. Ian Husbands from London, England. Ian, glad you're back with us. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, thank you, Rich, and hope everyone else is as well.
Doing very well, thank you. In the middle of corn country, of course.
Middle of corn country. How's weather in corn country?
It's cold.
Cold.
Very cold. It's the middle of winter.
It's not good for the corn.
We don't grow corn in the winter, thank goodness.
That'd be why then.
Yeah, now I know you have some statistics for me from last week's broadcast. Why don't you go over those very quickly?
I do. Well, it can be very quickly, actually, because our song of the week, which was Faith in Fire by Sound of the Sirens, was 100% all of the way. The audience agreed in best songwriting, best performance, and best mix and production. So
across the board, huh?
Across the board, 100% through and through.
Well, I'm glad to hear our audience is finally agreeing with you and Tom.
Makes a change.
It makes things interesting anyway. I appreciate you being here, Ian. Thank you very much. Our guest panelist today is no stranger to music, no stranger to art in general. Mr. Tony Palmer is a British film director and author whose works include over 100 films. And according to my bio, ranging from early works with the Beatles, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, and Frank Zappa, and classical portraits which include Igor Stravinsky, Richard Wagner, Benjamin Britten, and Ralph Vaughan Williams. We appreciate Mr. Tony Palmer being with us. Mr. Palmer, glad to have you on Music Scene Investigation. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Rich. Welcome to London. I mean, what Ian didn't tell you was it's freezing cold outside, it's dark, and it's a miserable day. And what's more, my football team lost. What more do you want to know?
Well, I don't know a lot about English football.
Well, you should. You should be ashamed of yourself. It's one of the most... There's a famous quote about Liverpool Football Club by one of its most famous coaches, I think you call him, Bill Shankly, who said, "Football, it's more important than life and death." There you go.
Well, there you are. I guess it's got to be true then, and I'll have to brush up. I'm a big fan of Australian rules football, but I guess that's a totally different football altogether.
It is. It's thuggery.
Now, according to your bio, you're a director and an author, and you've directed both film and theater, including opera. Now, my first question to you, and I hope this is an intelligent question, has to do with the differences in directing film and directing theater. I imagine the differences are quite vast, but for those who aren't in the business of directing, like myself, I've always been interested in what those differences might be, how vast they are.
Well, I mean, there are obvious technical differences. When I began to make films, we used very slow 16 millimeter celluloid. Today we use extremely fast digital cameras. I mean, I think you can see that's about the size of the digital cameras we use now. That's about the size of the film cameras we used to use. So there are technical aspects. I mean, clearly you're not involved in that if you're in the theatre. But essentially you're dealing with the same kind of people. And if I call them children, I don't mean that either patronizingly or cruelly, but they are people who need to feel confident in what they're doing, who need to be nursed and encouraged, just like children. Whether you're dealing with a great actor, I worked many times with Laurence Olivier, and he was every bit as much of a child, if you see what I mean, as was Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen, who I made a big famous film with, I mean, he needed to have his hand held. He needed to feel, in other words, that the atmosphere, either on the stage or in the film or on television, was such that he could give of his best. I mean, you would never tell Olivier how to speak a certain line, but you would want to make him feel welcome and sufficiently confident that he could give you that piece of magic which you knew he had, and that's why you wanted to work with him. Exactly the same with Leonard Cohen. No difference, really. You're dealing with people. It's if I call it man management, that sounds as if you're diminishing it, but not really. That's essentially the element which, whether it's film or opera or television or whatever, that's your responsibility, man management, to make everybody feel comfortable.
Now, you mentioned that you'd worked on a number of famous films, and I'm reading in your bio among 40 international prizes as well as BAFTA and Emmy awards. With a career as amazing as yours, with some of the people and some of the projects you've been involved with, is it about winning awards? Is it about telling the story? Why do you do what you do?
I have absolutely no idea, because I can't do anything else now. I mean, I fell into it quite by accident. I was an academic at Cambridge University, and that I thought was going to be my life and career. And somebody finally worked out the exact date. I think it's October 1963. I went on behalf of the university newspaper to a press conference given by 4 fairly unruly people who just produced a couple of #1 hits. And at the end of the press conference, we were all standing around, and one of them came over to me and sort of poked me on the shoulder. I was going to say tapped me on the shoulder. Actually poked me, it hurt, and said, "You didn't ask any questions. Why not?" And I said, "Well, I thought it was all rather silly." And he said, It was very silly. And that was somebody called John Lennon. And he asked me what I did, and I told him the subject I was studying, and he said, "That's pretty silly too." And I said, "Yes, it is. You're absolutely right." And then he said, "Would I show him around the university?" "No, why not?" "Well, we'll be mobbed, or you'll be mobbed." And he said, "Well, how about if I come in disguise?" So I said, "Okay." So I turned up about 2:00, and there was this very strange-looking chap with a very long false beard, an enormous fedora hat, and an extremely dirty brown Macintosh. And we got the giggles, I'm afraid. And so he threw away the disguise, and I managed to show him 1 or 2 of the incredibly beautiful buildings in Cambridge, in the university. And he just scribbled a number on the piece of paper as we finished, because he had to go back to give a concert that evening in Cambridge. And the Regal Cinema, I remember it was. So all coming back to me. And he said, "Next time you come to London, give me a call." And I didn't. I said, "I'm not coming to London for about at least 3 years because I'm studying." And he said, "Well, when you do, call me." Now, of course, at that point, 63, the Beatles were quite famous, but they weren't as intergalactic as they became when I finally came to London in 1966. But I still had the piece of paper. So I called the number, and the girl on the other end, I mean, I was obviously the 400th person who'd rung up that morning to say, "John Lennon said to call." And you could hear her yawn, "Oh, yes, another idiot." And I said, "But he did." And I thought I'd never hear another word. Anyway, about an hour later, a man called Derek Taylor, who was the Beatles publicist at that time, called me back and said, "I have a message for you from John." I was working at the BBC by now. And I thought, it's going to be the message is going to be, "F at you." And I've never heard of you. What do you want? But the message was, "Why has it taken you 3 years to call me back?" So we went out and had lunch, had a lot of brown rice. And he said it was my duty, because as I said, I worked at the BBC. It was my duty now to change what was possible, what was thought possible on BBC television in terms of popular music. He said, because most of his friends either didn't want to appear behind gyrating nubiles. I mean, you had the Dave Clark show, I think, in the States, so
Right.
You know what I mean.
Right.
Nothing wrong with gyrating nubiles, but if you're Jimi Hendrix, you do not want to appear behind the gyrating nubiles. Or there was a totally idiotic a panel show called Jukebox Jury, where people had to just listen to 20 seconds and vote it a hit or a miss. I mean, it was bonkers. Anyway, so John said, there are all of these extraordinary musicians who simply can't get onto the BBC. I said, like who? And he wrote out a list. And I said, well, I know who these people are, but I don't know them. And he said, I'll make the introductions. You make the film. And the list included Jimi Hendrix, who we just mentioned, Cream, Pink Floyd. Oddly enough, I'd been to school with Roger Waters. I was at the same junior school, high school, I think you would call it in the States. And Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Eric Burdon, and of course the Beatles. So I made this film. It was called All My Loving. BBC panicked about it completely and left it on the shelf for about 9 months, but eventually they showed it. And they showed it very late one night, because in those days, BBC television used to finish at 10:30, and it would be followed by a kind of epilogue. You know, a priest would appear, or a rabbi, or, you know, you'd do a bit of a blessing and then go off and have your cocoa and go to bed. 10:30 in the evening. But on this occasion, it was followed by this film, All My Loving. And John and I had a bet that the serious newspapers, if I can call it that, they would hate every minute of it, as it being, because basically it was about what these guys were about. I mean, the political milieu in which they found themselves.
Right.
And the popular press, they would absolutely love it. And that was my bet. John thought the other way around. He was absolutely right. The popular press absolutely loathed the film. The serious press, for months afterwards, wrote very long dissertations about the new meaning of popular music. But the great thing that it did was, and I can say this with a certain sense of pride, was that overnight it changed popular music on the BBC. Absolutely overnight.
Well, I guess we give you...
That was a long answer to your short question.
No, absolutely. It was a fascinating story. And I guess we have to give you credit for changing the face of music on the BBC, as like we give one of our fellow panelists, John Schroeder, for bringing Motown from the United States over to Britain. So you guys have quite a lot in common in those regards. Now, when you move from movies into the theater, we're talking, classical music, opera, and things like that. How does that differ? How does it differ working in something like an operatic genre compared to, something along the lines of the Beatles, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, and so forth?
Well, as I said, I mean, I think there are two things. I mean, one, I describe them as children. I mean, I'll use that word again, but I don't wish it to sound I'm just being sort of patronizing and putting them down. I mean, I have unbounded admiration for most of the great musicians that I filmed, whether Eric Clapton or Rory Gallagher or Leonard Cohen. I mean, just absolutely unbounded admiration. But while we're just dealing with music, for example, you mentioned Stravinsky. I both met and worked with and made eventually a big film about Stravinsky. And in an interview I did with him, I asked him, absolutely at the end of his life, I asked him, I didn't say, what do you think about popular music? Because he'd used popular music all his life. Sure. Either folk songs or ragtime or whatever. But I said, how would you define music? Oh, he said, that's easy. I can't and won't do his voice spoke like that. He said, there are only three kinds of music. He said, good music, bad music, and non-music. And his view, which is my view, is there are some wonderful Beatles songs. There are some terrible Beatles songs. There's all sorts of wonderful popular music. There's some total rubbish. There's some great classical music, obviously, but there's some rubbish. It doesn't really matter whether it's called classical or pop or jazz or whatever. There's great music and there's less great music, and there's some music which should never be heard again, in my view. Well,
luckily for you, you're here at MSI, because we get all three. So we get some great music, we get some not so great music, and some music, as you said, should never be heard again. So, we're very, very pleased to have you with us, and very much so look forward to what you have to say about today's music that we're going to hear in just a little bit. Now, I do want to go over to Tom and Ian and find out if they have a couple of questions for you before we get into actually listening to some of this music. So, Tom, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. I should say before Tom speaks that, I mean, what is wonderful is the joy of finding new music, whether it's pop or classical or whatever genre it is, the joy that you experience when you suddenly come across something you didn't know and you think, my God, why didn't I know that before?
I think we'll all agree with you on that 100%. Tom, did you have any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Palmer?
Well, I imagine that you do lecture tours and whatever. And if so, what do you like to speak about most? And is your love of film, music, opera, what have you, and your knowledge is vast, obviously. Does that make it hard to get across to the people that you're speaking about just exactly what you mean?
Well, I mean, I only go on lecture tours when I'm absolutely provoked, if you see what I mean. But what I do from time to time, but I'm so preoccupied with whatever the new film is that I'm making. But what I do from time to time is we'll go and introduce one of my films, and then I won't talk about the film itself because that's not for me to talk about, but I'll give a little bit of historical background. Like, for example, I mentioned this film I made with Leonard Cohen called Bird and the Wire. Now, how that came to be made and then lost for 35 years and then finally pieced back together again, personally, I think is a very interesting story. So whenever I go to show, or wherever I'm asked to show Bird on a Wire, I will go and, if I possibly can, I will go and introduce it. But I won't talk about the film itself. But for example, this coming Thursday, I'm going to be at La Scala Opera House in Milan, introducing a very big film I made once about Rachmaninoff, who is an extraordinary composer.
Absolutely.
Because the story of Rachmaninoff is itself fascinating. And I was very lucky in being not only asked to make the film, but meeting all kinds of people who, including Rachmaninoff's grandson and other people who had known and worked with him. And so I can't resist just telling a little bit about the background. That's what I'm happy to do. I'm not happy to talk about the films themselves. The films have to speak for themselves. But for example, the Rachmaninoff film, Rachmaninoff, as you probably know, was left Russia as a result of the Russian Revolution in 1917. And the first thing the communists did was burn down his house. He had quite a large estate south of Moscow, and they just, in revenge, they just flattened it. And then round about 1993, I'd heard that the house had been rebuilt. So I persuaded Rachmaninoff's grandson to come with me, and the film camera, of course, to go back and look at his grandfather's house, which, as far as we knew, had been rebuilt exactly as it had been originally. And we took him. And I mean, it was just incredibly emotional for him. He just burst into tears. He'd obviously never seen it before, but he burst into tears when he was shown around the interior of the house to realize that that's where his grandfather had lived and written many of the great works that we know. I mean, that was a very extraordinary experience. It's in the film, but I quite like to introduce the film by telling that story of taking Alexander, he was called the grandson, Rachmaninoff. He died sadly last year, but I think he was 80, taking the grandson back to where his grandfather had lived and worked and written much of the great music that we know.
It's an amazing story, Ian?
No, do you know what, Rich? I think Tony's covered everything I want to know about the Beatles and the Hendrix and the Rachmaninoff and the Leonard Cohen stuff, so I'm good.
All right, well, I'll tell you what we'll do then. Let's get to the business at hand and listen to some of this music today that we have going on. Let's take a listen to song number 1 on today's Music Scene Investigation, and we'll get this show on the road. Here is, everyone, song number 1 on today's MSI.
Never
There it is, song number one on today's music scene investigation. We're going to go straight to Mr. Ian Husbands first, find out what he thought. Ian, your thoughts on song number one?
Well, I love the groove on this to start with. It's bobbing my head and tapping my foot all the way through that. It's strong. And there's some good stuff going on here, I think. I like the vocal performance. Felt the vocal was very, very strong. Quite catchy with the lyrics. Would have liked to have heard more backup vocals, more layers, bigger choruses and things like that. I mean, overall, I think there's a good arrangement here. There's a good song here. The riffs are hooky. It really does catch you and sort of just take you on that head bobbing sort of trip. Like the breakdown into the middle eight with the haze and that stuff coming in, and the little Tom Morello style lead guitar in there towards the back end of the middle eight as well. Mix-wise, I found the guitars were overbearing, vocals were buried at points, as were the drums in parts. I did find the vocal mix a little inconsistent towards the start of the song. I mean, the mix kind of leveled out as the song went on. But I do think just the mix was just full on and a bit more space in there, maybe less compression overall to sort that out. But I mean, otherwise, yeah, there's a good track here. It's the sort of thing I'd listen to. It's got that sort of Creed, sort of Sum 41 style sound coming from it. But I mean, that works, and it sells records, so it could work.
All right. Thank you very much, Ian. I appreciate your thoughts. And Tom Chianti, what do you think of track number one today?
Let's see where to start. A very modern recording, well thought out, well played. A little dark overall for my taste. I think a little brightness overall, little shiny spots coming through here and there would have given it more of a presence and allowed for a greater impact. The vocal, well performed. It had a hook. It had a nice middle eight. I didn't like that they went to that distorted type of vocal in the middle eight. I would have preferred a very dry, catch your attention, full on compressed tight vocal in your face to really give it a dynamic lift, which most of the middle eights are there for tension and release. Guitars were a little muddy, like I said. I would have liked a little bit more brightness overall, but very good effort. A lot of thought went into the mix, and I enjoyed this song.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Tom. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Mr. Tony Palmer to find out what he thought. Tony, your thoughts on track number one?
Well, I'm about to make myself very popular. I thought that was torture. I thought it was unspeakably dreary. I thought it was monotonous. I was trying hard to listen to the drums to see if he ever did anything of any remotely interesting rhythm, but I don't think he did. It was just pum-ti-pum-ti-pum-ti-pum. I agree with Tom about the singing. I couldn't hear anything that the singer was singing. I mean, I was rather hoping that the subtitles would come up so I could follow what he was actually singing about. What I really had against it, however, was that, I mean, all great songs, great music has light and shade. There were, not only was there no light and shade in this, there was eternal darkness from the first note to the last. I mean, it just kind of, I suppose in fairness, if one were to see them as well as hear them in either a club or even a concert, then one would perhaps appreciate what they were doing. But just listening to the sound, I mean, I just was in agony from the beginning. I simply couldn't follow what they were trying to tell me. I don't think they were trying to tell me anything. It reminded me of the worst excesses of MTV. I mean, if you've ever seen an MTV award show, that's the death of popular music. That has nothing to do with anything except trying to get the latest commercial sound and wring every last cent out of it that you could possibly do. I mean, I'm sure they're talented musicians. I didn't quite understand all the technical things that Tom was referring to, but I can see that effort went into it. That's obvious. But I just wish the raw material had been more interesting and therefore the effort had been worthwhile.
All right. Well, I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so very much. Now, I want to take and introduce that track to everybody. The name of that song is One of a Kind by a group called Above the Flood. We appreciate Above the Flood sending that track in to Music Scene Investigation. If you want your track in front of our panel, very easy to do. Go to musicsceneinvestigation.com. And you'll find a Submit a Song button at the top of the page. Click that, sign up, and submit your music right then and there. We'll select 1, 2, and 3 randomly every week for placement in front of our panel, and you could be next. Who knows? You got to go to Music Scene Investigation to find out. Gentlemen, we have 2 more tracks to play, so let's go ahead and take a listen to track number 2 on today's Music Scene Investigation. Here it is, everyone. Track number 2. Enjoy.
I can't see you. I hope this isn't over. I can't feel you. We're another year older. I can't see you. I hope this isn't over. I can't feel we're another year older. Seem like forever. Life's not for everyone. To each other, you moved I can't see you. I hope this isn't over. I can't feel you. We're another year older.
And there is song number 2. We'll go to Mr. Tom Chianti first to find out his take on track number 2. Tom, what do you think of song number 2 today?
Well, I get what they were trying for, I think. They were trying to go for a very spacious, ambient type of sound. The lyrics, they've got the beginnings of a nice lyrical song here. And I think they were maybe a little bit too overconfident, and they let the engineer go crazy, or they tried to create space, and what they did is made a one-dimensional mix. The effects are too much in front. They should be behind the vocal. The vocal was very hard to make out. It was, I believe, a decent performance. And it was repetitive, very short on the lyrical content, but like I said, a good start. Switching to the heavy hip-hop style drum and clacking snare. I mean, it's a good idea. I would have done it much different. There are so many ways that this could have been done and thought out better. The performances were okay. I would have taken it further and gone a little bit more stark, a little bit more minimalistic. I would have really worked that vocal to get the emotions across and not make it so repetitive. It's repetitive. I keep repeating myself. And again, it was on the dark side. I think they need to take this back and see where they went wrong. And it was a little overproduced. It was left on the burner a little too long in the wrong direction with the wrong seasonings. That's about it.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. Mr. Tony Palmer, your thoughts on track number 2 today?
Well, I mean, it was 100 miles better than song number 1, so I have to say that to start with. I didn't mind it being repetitive. I mean, some very great music is repetitive. I mean, it has a simple idea which it repeats and repeats and repeats. I think repetition in itself is not a bad thing. If I heard Tom correctly, he couldn't understand the words either. I didn't get a single word, but I mean, that could simply be I'm listening in some godforsaken part of London and, you know, we don't understand things over here. I don't know. Do you know what it reminded me most of? It reminded me of Syd Barrett, you know, the early member of Pink Floyd. It was that kind of fantasy song. And I thought it actually, I mean, I'm not experienced enough as Tom is in the producing of these things, but I thought there were some very interesting elements there. I mean, that of the Syd Barrett variety that I thought could very easily be developed. I wish I could hear what the words are about, because I'm sure the words were meant to be heard clearly and meant to be important. I love however it was done electronically, that double bass clunk that kept coming in and giving it a kind of a shape. I thought, unlike song number 1, it definitely had a very clearly defined shape, partly out of its repetition, but also in the way that it used the various elements and they kept being developed. I thought it had charm. I wouldn't mind listening to it again, actually, now, because you can't really tell from one listen to a piece of music. And I would certainly hope that they don't lose heart, whatever rubbish all of us are saying, and go on developing what they've got, because I think there is a kind of good musical instinct there. Again, I would hope for some. I mean, music is about development. I mean, we talked about the Beatles earlier, and we shouldn't only use them as comparison. But you know, all the great Beatles songs develop. They start with something very simple, and I'm not saying develop in the sense it gets louder and bigger and more repetitive, like Hey Jude. But there is a kind of internal development about the musical structure. And that's what one should look for. You know, it's not enough just to put down a good first 4 bars and hope the audience don't notice if nothing else happens for the next 7 hours while it just goes on repeating itself. This was better than that. I thought it had really interesting potential. And I'm not a record producer and I'm not really a music critic, but I would hope that they don't lose heart, and I hope they get themselves a decent producer.
All right. Well, I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much, Mr. Ian Husbands. Your take on track number 2.
I mean, I think Tony's hit the nail on the head here from my point of view and what I've been thinking. There is talent here. It's not necessarily displayed at its best in this track, but I thought the mix was lush. I thought it was really nice and full, and the sound placements. The only thing I didn't like was the bass sound. It was very MIDI for my liking. I wanted to hear a real bass in there. And I didn't like the breakdown where it just went to the bass and the vocals. I found it was too sudden, too instant, and the structure needed to sort of flow a bit better. The arrangement needed to sort of flow into the parts a bit more, rather than be so sudden in all cases. Obviously, the ending was a bit of a bugbear. It just stopped. It didn't even fade out. So I'd like to hear more work on the ending, because again, my principle, if this is going to be played live, it's going to have an ending at some point in time. So it needs to end properly. It's obviously, from my point of view, someone using loops, someone using something like GarageBand or something along that line, putting a collection of nice loops together very, very well. It does take talent to put loops together constructively that sound and work together. That is where the repetitiveness is coming from. So I would like to hear a bit more freedom in the music as well. But overall, there is some strong talent. I couldn't understand the words. My main problem with that vocal was the auto-tune. Again, overdone, overused. There's obviously a singer there that can belt out some notes. Let's hear them. Let's not hear the computer making it sound all weird.
All right, well said. I appreciate your thoughts as well. The name of that track is called Brenda, and it's by a group or a person called Abstrak, and we appreciate Abstrak sending that track in to us, and want to thank him for that. Also want to remind everybody that the Indie Music Bus is out there. If you're an independent artist looking for promotion on the net, don't have time to do it yourself, well, go out to the Indie Music Bus at indiemusicbus.com, hook up with Walter Hargrave out there, and see if he might be able to help you out a little bit. I'm sure he can. All right, gentlemen, we have one more track to go through today, and I want to get right to it and get your thoughts on this one. We'll come back with Tony's thoughts on it after we hear it. Here is track number 3 on today's Music Scene Investigation. That's going to be track 3 on today's Music Scene Investigation. We'll find out what our panelists thought about that right now. Mr. Tony Palmer. Tony, what do you think about track number 3?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I really would like to see that group on stage. They seem to me to have bags of potential, musically speaking. I wasn't sure at the beginning. I thought it was a War of the Worlds meets Bernard Herrmann before it got going. But I mean, the most important thing to say was they had whether they sat down or whether they did it instinctively, I don't know. But the song definitely had a structure. It developed, it changed gear, it thought about where it's got to, then it thought, well, we'll go off in this direction. In a strange kind of way, that's why I said I really would like to see them on stage, because I just felt they were inhibited all the time. I mean, with a fantastic group, say, like Cream, you can see them doing the first 2 or 3 minutes of that song and then just improvising for the next 25 minutes. Now, I instinctively felt that the musicians on this, you could hear it in one section with the drummer, the lead guitarist less so, they were just bursting to get going. But somehow they were kind of inhibited by the fact that whether they were because they were in a recording studio or whether they felt they couldn't, I don't know. But you just sensed that they were just straining at the least to get going and burst out of the confines of the structure that they had carefully thought out. I thought the good thing about it was the structure. The good thing about it was that there seemed to be bags of potential there, and I really would have liked to have seen those guys on stage. However, this is not really a criticism of just this one, but of all the songs that we've heard today. I mean, one of the wonderful things about popular music and one of the fascinating things about popular music is that at its best, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about, we keep referring to the Beatles, I mean, whether you're talking about the Beatles or Leonard Cohen or jazz or blues or rock and roll even, they are people telling you something about themselves and the world in which they live. Country music is the perfect example in a way, appallingly cliched though it can be, that they are telling you something that affects them and they want other people to know it and they want other people to be inspired in the way that they have been inspired. Now, this last song, you could say that it had that potential. The other two I don't think did, but that's what is wonderful for me about popular music. And I think on that criterion alone, all three of them failed to come up to it. But although the last one I thought just about had enough potential, as I said, I want to see them on stage now. I'm buying a ticket now for their next live gig.
All right, well, good enough. Let's go over to Ian, find out what he thought. Ian, your take on track number 3.
Yeah, I want to be at the same gig Tony's going to be at. I mean, the energy from that track was just amazing. And I think Tony's right to see that live. It's just going to be bigger. It's going to be better. It's going to be bolder. And, it's got that sort of, for me, that sort of, just as grunge was happening in Seattle, they were sort of picking up a lot of the English punk movement. And you had this sort of hybrid of grunge and punk music. And it's got that edge, bands like Mudhoney and people like that. And it's just raw. And you can feel it. And you know that everyone in that band is heads down going for it. There are some mix issues. I mean, I found the guitars were a touch too loud. I did lose the vocals in places. And, again, it's a personal preference, but I would love to heard some supporting BVs on that chorus just to sort of make it bigger and bolder. But, the change of pace into the middle eight, it was just unexpected, but it worked so well. And then the way it dropped back into the song as it was before. Would you like a flake on your 99, I think was the line going on there, which is just fantastic because, let's face it, we always want a flake on our 99.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, Ian, thank you very much. And over to Mr. Tom Chianti. Tom, your take on track 3.
Well, I agree with what Tony said about the structure being exciting and the potential that's there. One thing that stood out more than anything was I smelled fear. This is a group that is mostly dependent on instrumentalists the soloing and forget the mix issues. Real quickly, the vocal was too low, guitars too loud, intrusive. And again, there are lots of mix issues, but the structure and the directions they went. The verses reminded me a little bit of Pink Floyd, if a little reverb and delay was thrown on it. But what was really lacking was these guys reaching their full potential, if they even realize it themselves. I think they played it safe and said, okay, let's not get carried away. Let's cut a song and just be very professional. If anything, they tried to be too professional and toned it down. The energy was not there for me. What I heard were musicians well rehearsed, and they the intro they could lose. I really loved the drum groove, and I think it should have started with that.
I must agree with that. That synth was annoying.
Yeah. The outro was good, maybe a little too long, but these guys should have just let loose and really played. Do some Santana guitars and some really exciting jazz type drumming. Maybe add an organ that's doing some riffing. I was, the song has the potential to make a statement, but it failed to do so, as Tony said. There is a lot of potential there, and I really wished, and probably, again, as Tony said, live, and Yazine said live, these guys would probably let loose, and the song would be about 10 minutes long. I think they took studio too seriously and forgot about the musicians that they are.
All right.
I would agree with that, absolutely. That's what I meant by straining at the least. I mean, you just sense that they were just wanting to burst out and get on with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate that. The name of that track for everyone out in our audience is called Sour Candy. The group is called Zeerox. Zeerox with Sour Candy. Appreciate your sending that into Music Scene Investigation. All right, gentlemen, as we do every week at this time, you have the unenviable task of selecting a song of the week from the three you've heard today. So I'll leave it to you to talk amongst yourselves and make that selection right now.
We can't go back and listen again, right?
No, I'm sorry, you can't.
To be honest, I don't think it's going to be much of a conversation, is it? I think this one's pretty sewn up.
How so?
You're going for number one, I can tell, Ian. I can tell you're going for number one. Shame on you.
No, I'm going to go with number 3. Definitely the best we've heard tonight.
Yeah, me too. Everything that both Ian and Tom said, I entirely agree with. You just sensed that they were being, for some reason or other. I think Tom had it right. They felt they were in a studio. We've got to behave. We've got to show that we are well-disciplined musicians. To hell with that. Great musicians are not disciplined in that sense. They're free souls who want to fly. And you sense that this song, given half a chance, would have flown. The fact that it didn't, I think there are probably all kinds of quasi-commercial reasons that we don't know. But you just sense that they were on the cusp of something.
Yeah.
And Tom?
The mix issues really bother me. And like I said, the intro and the outro. But as far, best song of the week, this was the most interestingly structured. There was motion in it, and that's, despite the mix. And I really wish the guys had let go, and that's why I'm reluctant, but I will go with everyone else on number 3.
All right, so track number 3, it is again Sour Candy by Zeerox, and there you have your song of the week. Mr. Palmer, Tony, I appreciate you being with us. A pleasure indeed to have you here. Your insight is amazing. Thank you so much.
Not at all. But joking apart, how do we find out where they're performing? I mean, shouldn't there be some clue? Are we allowed to say
Absolutely.
that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Zeerox has a profile on Music Scene Investigation and a link to their website. I'm sure can be found there. In fact, I will ensure that when I post the information later today, I include that information.
Thank you. That would be good.
Absolutely.
As long as they're not in Tahiti or somewhere or something.
Actually, I believe they are in the UK, if I remember correctly.
Are they? Oh, that would be wonderful. I mean, I once did recommend a group to be told that they lived in Tasmania. I went off them very quickly, let me assure you.
Well,
Tony, I've got a quick question for you as well. We got one of the guys in the chat simply wants to know, what football team do you support?
Well, my local team is Queen's Park Rangers, as you well know, which had a notable triumph yesterday. But today I was supporting Arsenal and they lost. So this is a bad day.
Well, it happens. Even my Cubs baseball team can't win every day. Mr. Palmer, thanks so much. If anybody wants more information on Mr. Tony Palmer, please head over to his website at tonypalmer.org. You can find out anything and everything you'd like to know about Mr. Palmer. Thanks again, Tony.
It's a pleasure. It's not all good on the website, I have to add.
At least it's honest. There you go.
Thanks, Tony.
Pleasure.
Tony, I really enjoyed your stories and your insights into the music, and you got a real feel for presentation, and that's what I love about music, is how it's presented, and your insights were excellent in that. I hope you do want to come back again, because it would be our pleasure.
Tom, I'm embarrassed to be on the same show as not only Ian, but somebody like you, because when I listen to your very careful and very skillful analysis of things like mixers and so on, I just feel so ignorant. I want to kind of hide under my desk. So I really appreciated the careful detail that you went into. But it's been fun. It's been fun, and I really enjoyed myself. Thank you very much for asking.
We had a great time. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone out in our audience for being with us again today. We'll be here again next week, same time, same channel. Please join us then when we'll have 3 more songs to go over. And this is Music Scene Investigation. You can find out more at musicsceneinvestigation.com. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.
something